Lithuanian and Baltic identity is really coming into its own as the defenders of Western liberal tradition. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I want to discuss something that has filled me with a great deal of confidence, given how I'd been feeling more trepidatious about this issue in the past, and that is how Lithuania's identity is really coming into its own. As anyone who watches this channel knows, Lithuania is one of, if not my favorite countries in the world, as with the other Baltic states, Latvia and Estonia. The people are amazing, the history is incredibly under-researched, and the country will be discovered one day, and at which time, it may be overrun by tourists. But for now, it's one of the great secrets of the world. But one thing that had worried me was how Lithuanians see themselves. And we can see that play out in all kinds of significant policy areas, like the mass emigration of people from Lithuania, the population decline, issues of high levels of suicide rates and things like that. And also, when you ask a Lithuanian what it means to be Lithuanian, the answers that I had previously received had been somewhat unsatisfying. That is, you ask Lithuania, okay, what does being Lithuanian mean to you? And a lot of them will say, resisting the Soviet occupation, or our struggles against Russian oppression. And while that is absolutely valid, it's not really something that defines you. It only gives you an identity in relation to somebody else. A good example of that would be the Irish. Ireland obviously has many centuries of history entwined with the English, with the Saxons and the Normans, the Danelaw. And yet, if you ask an Irish man or woman what it means to be Irish, they won't mention England at all. They'll say things like, poetry and music, Celtic art and tradition, Guinness, all kinds of wonderful, iconic Irish things that are special and unique to that people. So I was always kind of encouraging Lithuanians to talk more about their own identity and what it means to be Lithuanian. And one of the motivations I have behind doing videos on Lithuanian history, talking about Lithuanian language, how it's thousands of years older than Latin, that it has a wonderful pagan history, the last country in Europe to be Christianized. There's so many things that are unique about Lithuania that deserves to be praised and spread, that, defining oneself entirely in opposition to Russia seemed to me to be an incomplete form of identity. Well, things have changed, and one great example of this is the UFC fighter Rose Namajunas. She is of Lithuanian heritage, and she got into some trouble a couple of weeks ago when she said that one of her motivations behind winning the strawweight championship in the UFC fighting was because of her struggle against communism and wanting to defeat the communists. Now, she was referring to the UFC strawweight champion, Zhang Weili, who is from China, obviously a great champion for her country. But she said, Rose said that her struggle against communism was her great motivator to beat Zhang Weili. Now, some people criticized her for bringing so-called politics into a sports competition. And on one level, I can understand that. But on another, I found it very intriguing because, here she is in the United States being so-called the leader of the free world, the country that saw off the Soviet Union, that at one point in the 1990s seemed to be the hyperpower of the entire earth, with the idea that Western liberal democracy would now reign supreme. And yet it's become almost gauche to say that you want to defend Western liberal democracy against communism. I mean, if she had said that same thing during the Cold War with, say, chess, Bobby Fischer versus Boris Spassky, it would have been completely anodyne. Like, just like, yes, we want to beat the communists. But we've seen this in a whole range of areas. I made a video a few weeks ago talking about how Lithuania seemed to be the only country with a backbone where they were willing to give up potential trade advantages with China, the One Belt, One Road initiative, because they were against the genocide of Uyghur Muslims. They were against what was happening in Hong Kong. They were against the social credit system. And people like Rose Namajunas, who are willing to stand up for Western liberal values, is something that's quite unique. And so I would call the Lithuanians the democratic conscience of the Western world. And there are a few reasons that I would observe about this. In the West, we have a crisis of confidence, particularly intergenerationally. So older people tend to be a bit more conservative, people who remember the Cold War, people who understand the benefits of freedom and democracy. And then younger people who in some ways have been economically disenfranchised. So they've been locked out of the housing ladder. They've been the ones to suffer, through lockdowns of COVID. They've had a lot of their aspirations thwarted, and particularly, just in the home life level, like they've delayed marriage, they've delayed having families. And so young people, are feeling somewhat disaffected in the West and tend to be much more so-called progressive, in the sense that they're more likely to entertain Marxist ideas and communist ideas or woke ideology, if you like. Whereas in Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, both young people and older people are on the same page. They understand what it's like to live in a society that isn't free, where you are deprived of having your own thoughts and ideas and freedom of exchange, that your individual liberty and choice over your own life is heavily circumscribed. And as a consequence of that, if you're a young person in Lithuania, you're probably somewhat kind of liberal conservative, and older people, just more conservative. But there's no moral confusion in Lithuania about what are the right values to have, that, equality of opportunity is not the same as equality of outcome, that sovereignty of the individual is absolutely paramount over collective group identity, and that communism is an inherent moral evil, and they are happy to defend that in a public way. Now, congratulations to Rose Namajunas. This week, she defeated Zhang Weili to take the UFC championship title. We've been looking for the fight online. It's very hard to get this footage because I presume UFC are very strong in their copyright, understandably so. We can show you some reactions, though. Joe Rogan, the famous podcaster, UFC commentator, was present there. He had an extraordinary reaction when Namajunas KO'd her opponent. And then there's another great photo of them together at the end of the fight. So if you do find an opportunity to go and see that footage, go have a look. It's an amazing, amazing battle. And done, with the merits of Western liberal democracy in mind. Now, I'm sure Zhang Weili is a wonderful person, and I'm not using her as a proxy for Chinese government communist dictatorship or anything like that. But it is still quite great to see things being played out in those terms, and it hasn't been a long time since we've done that. Certainly not since Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky in the 1970s, when Bobby Fischer defeated the Soviets at their national sport, chess. And I think that we'll see a lot more of this dynamic play out in the years and decades to come. But the point of this video is to praise and acknowledge Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, their emerging national identity as custodians of democratic freedoms and traditions, things that had previously been the remit of the United States. I think Lithuania is becoming the inheritor of that, whereas the US and other countries, including Australia, are going through this crisis. I mean, I remember the other day there was a puff piece interview by StarTrek.com. Now, sort of Star Trek's owned by CBS. Where they interviewed an avowed communist, right? And this is literally, they call themselves the Star Trek communist. And it was just this adoring piece talking about how Star Trek in the future is allegedly a communist utopia, and that is true communism that everybody is working towards who are communists. And I was watching this going, this is absolutely insane. Yes, Gene Roddenberry's vision is of a utopian future in which humans have solved a lot of their problems, but it's absolutely not communist. For example, some of the best episodes, some of the best themes of the franchise are about the liberty of the individual, their human sovereign rights, their dignity as free-thinking individuals. That's why the Borg is such a threat with their collective consciousness. That's why the Cardassian Union is an antagonist, because they are a communist dictatorship. And when they go, oh, yes, but look at the economics of the future, where people aren't working for material goods and prosperity, they're working for the betterment of humanity. All that means is that once you reach a certain level of affluence, you do start thinking about other forms of actualization. Elon Musk, for example, is certainly a capitalist, but he's spending most of his time and effort on things that he thinks will expand the human condition, like traveling to Mars, right? Exploring the universe. Well, that's exactly what the Star Trek vision is. They have solved the fundamental economic challenge of unlimited wants and limited means, because they can just replicate everything. And if you're in that space, you have the luxury to do other things. But that was certainly not a communist utopia. Communism was still a warning for Star Trek, and yet you would think that all of the modern views of that franchise, this franchise that's been around since the 1960s, today is being puffed up as this communist ideal. Something that I think Lithuania sees through, Estonia sees through, Latvia sees through, and I look forward to, in the coming years and decades, see how a free Lithuania emerges as the true observers of the wonders of Western liberal tradition, of capitalism, of democracy, of individual sovereign rights, and to be able to present that moral case in a faithful way. It's extraordinary that we have to rely on these small countries to tell us why Western democracy is the great thing, the wonderful thing that it is. And yet they're doing that, and they're doing that at personal cost. And my only hope is, as I've said in previous videos, is that the EU, that the United States, the other countries in the West acknowledge that they're doing this at personal sacrifice. They're foregoing possible relationships with China, with Iran, with other countries, because they're standing up for moral good. They're saying, look, no, we will not trade with countries that are guilty of genocide. Or look at the United Kingdom. Boris Johnson is resisting a massive rebellion on his own conservative backbench, saying they were going to pass a law, wanting to pass a law saying, look, the UK will not do trade deals with countries that are guilty of committing genocide. And Boris Johnson's like, no, we want to leave that door open. We want to be able to trade with countries that commit genocide. And that throws him into a tailspin when it comes to China and the Uyghurs, because what's he going to say? That it's not happening? Well, Lithuania is quite clear about this. It's saying, yes, it is happening, and no, we're not going to deal deals with countries that do it. I mean, that's the way, this moral clarity that we're lacking. They're very much the Winston Churchill of 1939, where they just have absolute understanding about what the Chinese government is. They've experienced this before, and that the Western liberal tradition doesn't deserve this crisis of confidence that they are currently experiencing, and that hopefully Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia will make a success of it. to demonstrate that we shouldn't be going down that path. So congratulations to Rose Namajunas, and of course, wonderful to see that Lithuania now has, I think, a true international identity. It's not just about resisting a foreign power. It's about standing up for those traditions that we can trace back to the ancient Greeks and beyond. And if you found value in this discussion, please hit that like button. We're getting to that 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you've been watching these videos, you've got value and haven't hit subscribe yet, please do so. Share this video with others that might be interested, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much.